we've billed this, choices and politics of decarbonisation, a question of European growth, but it's a question of everything. To be honest with you, it's not just growth. It's about how do we sustain communities? How do we keep ourselves sane and able to live in a place, work in a place, and learn in an effective way, because all of it's connected to decarbonisation. I want to bring this report to your attention. We recommend this as your essential reading. It's our 10 policy choices for a renewed social contract. And what we tried to do with this report was to assemble, through lots of experts and others, what would be the ideas for the new mandate, for this current mandate. And the first one of the first ones in here is about use decarbonisation as a driver for all policy making, because if we don't decarbonise, the game's a bogey. We're not going to get anywhere. So on that note, it gives me great pleasure. We have an excellent panel. A word of warning, usually what I'd like to do is break up the panel and have conversations. But because we have a number here, you'll have to be patient. I'm sorry, I don't like doing that, but because there's 5 of you, and we'll run out of time, and we've got action-packed agenda for you by the time you're, toddling off home because you feel knackered, but hopefully well fed and well stimulated. But we've got classically private sector and civil society actors and others and members of parliament all ready for you. So I'm going to turn first to yourself. Michela, thank you for being with us. Big, very significant energy company like others on the panel, but in particular, given what you've been doing. Can you say, obviously you don't have to answer the Commissioner's question in this particular sense, but what would be the role that you have as a company to accelerate and improve green tech, and I suppose related to that, the question of citizen trust, because at the moment, people don't know what to believe and what they should actually follow.
Thank you very much, Dharmendra. Good morning, everyone. I will try at least to tackle one angle of also the question of Mr. Commissioner Jorgensen. It's not an easy question, but let me start, if you give me the privilege to start with some basic concepts that we were taught for decades in the energy sector, and probably most of you know it. Decarbonization, security of supply, affordability. These were always the 3 pillars. Probably we woke up nearly 3 years ago, saying that we took for granted 2 of them. We made a lot of effort for the first, for decarbonization, which still has to be our lighthouse, but not so much for the other 2. And we are now basically, and we all know, trying to cope with the situation, not having huge volumes of cheap Russian gas. It's actually impacting all over our economy. I come from a country, Italy, in which the wholesale price, because the electricity is made mainly by gas, it's double the price, for example, of Spain. It's 100 euro per megawatt hour, and it's causing huge problems for competitiveness. So big questions around. Shall we pass from a dependence on fossil fuel to a dependence on, for example, clean tech equipment? Dharmendra was asking me about the green tech. We all know that PV and wind are the major driver of this transition. These are the only homemade sources that we have in Europe. Very little gas, very little oil. And these are the cheapest. And we all know that. Okay. And we have been investing a lot. My company, 43 billion in renewables and grids together in 25, 6, and 7, so in 3 years. Other companies, for sure, like NG, also huge investment programs. We are all, I think, committed for this particular purpose. Now, what is going on right now is that we see a slowdown in, let's say, the kind of predictability that we can have on investments, both on renewables, a little bit less on grids since they are more regulated. But at the same time, we see a lot of interest, for example, from big investors that are trying to diversify their portfolios from the US they see some risks over there, of course, asking us in Europe, for example, if they can invest. All of this needs a it's a very old concept, but a very stable and predictable environment. If we start balkanizing, I use this term, all our regulatory national environments, this is going to cause a big mess. We saw it during the crisis, partially was recovered. So definitely try to convince our member states. We are trying to do with our the governments with whom we work to stick to the energy union, to stick to the various different phases of the integration of the single market in the energy sector. Commissioner Jorgensen mentioned it. I will tackle just one thing on the clean tech. We talked about wind, solar. Wind is still with a very high market share produced in Europe, with challenges, of course. So competition also there from Asia is coming as an avalanche, in our opinion, with very high performance and actually costs or prices that are reducing, but still with a very big market share. For solar, is 95% of all the solar panels that we install in Europe are coming from one single country, great country, of course, that made huge investments throughout the years. Now, the question is, shall we say that it's fine, that it's okay, and that we cannot produce anymore or manufacture any more solar? It's a matter of competitiveness. If you say we don't have any chance to compete over there on prices, we have lost too many years, that can be an answer. There is another factual answer, which is saying that also in solar, there is innovation. There are prototypes panels that produce 30% more than the average panel, and they are done in Europe. And they are done here, but they don't have yet the scale to compete. So my answer on that, on the clean tech part, is that you need to incubate and help those kind of initiatives. We have Horizon, we have the Innovation Fund, we have many initiatives in Europe, of course. And you don't need only money. You can have things like non-price criteria in auction that already have been introduced. If wisely implemented with sustainability and innovation criteria, on which mostly in Europe we have a competitive advantage, this can be a very big help also to reshore at least part of that manufacturing capacity. To be able to have at least certain percentage of homemade solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries, and so on and so forth. These are not lost battles. There is a lot to do if we stick to, especially to innovation and to our competitive advantage over there. One last point on trust, basically, is on what you were saying. We see basically people. I think we all have families, friends, not only in the energy sector. I've been asked many times about prices, about affordability, less and less about climate and decarbonization. It seems really that in the mind of the people, it's actually going downwards, reducing the attention. I think that there is a key, which is the pockets and the wallets of everyone. It's saying when we talk about energy bills, we know that there is a huge potential, for example, in Europe. And in some countries, it's starting to work on flexibility tools like demand response. There are certain countries in which you are said, if you do the washing machines on a Sunday from 12 to 4 p.m., it's going to cost you $0. Because it's going to help the grids, because sometimes there is peak of production and so on and so forth. I mean, if we don't link flexibility and incentives, clear incentives that are economical to that, I think we're going to lose very fast, very big opportunities over there. So through the bills, of course, values and principles are always important, but I think that we have to give a very important signals, and Europe can do a lot in especially fostering, developing those best cases that are around Europe. That was just
No, thank you. Because I'm kind of conscious that I want to make sure there's enough space for the debate with people in the audience, but also with amongst you. The question I want you to think about, not right now, but is that the things that you've spoken about, who takes the lead, who creates the conditions for that to happen? And so I think that it'll be important to know, when we can all deconstruct the problem, but who takes the lead to making sure we can try solving it. I'm going to go to another company, a large company. Nicola, good to have you with us again. You heard what the commissioner said, and my kind of question to you is framed slightly in the sense of what kind of regulatory reform do we need? I mean, most people say duh, because we know what needs to happen, but it's not happening. But from your perspective, how can what is it you require, which will then have a knock-on effect on affordability?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. Pleasure to be here. First, I'd love to remind how good it is to have that title for this gathering, to have this bold vision. I think it's really important to reiterate the bold vision of Europe. At NG, we are very much committed to the energy transition, to being a champion of the energy transition. And in these turbulent times where you're right, maybe some people forget or it becomes less of a priority, it's very important for us to keep that North Star in sight, keeping those three pillars that you mentioned. Maybe just as a very, very brief reminder, we bring all of our knowledge of the energy industry into our own kind of crystal ball, really an industrial crystal ball. And we have these scenarios, long-term scenarios, which we very strongly believe in, and they are comforting because we believe that the energy transition and the objectives of Europe are achievable. And that they're achievable at a cost which will not break the bank. But for that to happen, I think you do need to have the regulations in place to continue to help the industrials like ourselves to invest in all of these critical areas. So I'll highlight a few areas to answer your questions of critical reforms and regulations that we think we need. One of them was mentioned by the commissioner just now. As you saw me, I was crossing my fingers that he would say a time frame sub a year for the permitting question. And that is something which is critical. I take part in our investment committees, whether it be for renewables, whether it be for infrastructures, whether it be for flexibility or other means. And the question by our developers of permitting always comes up, and it is a real challenge. Sometimes I wish that the members of parliament could spend a day in the life of an energy developer to really get a sense of these challenges. I think it'd be really interesting, but that certainly is a
Andrea,
challenge.
That's a job for you, right? For later
Exactly.
on, it's an invitation.
Yes.
It's an invitation.
For you to make it happen. But I think it'd be really, really interesting because it is a challenge, not only in terms of the time and all the hoops that you need to get over, but also how different it is in all the different jurisdictions, different countries. So it's really a real challenge to take on. And it's something that we strongly believe can be addressed. The second reform is really to double down on this notion of these predictable long-term investment frameworks for the energy transition. I think it's well in the debate. We know what are the three big families of levers: CFDs, PPAs, and capacity mechanisms, or maybe we should call them flexibility mechanisms. But we need to continue the work to make these longer term, to make these more accessible to different types of companies, not just the big, large companies which have the sophisticated large balance sheet and so on, but also for SMEs. And I know we've got people around this table who are experts in that sense. So make it more accessible and make them also more flexible to the extent that they cover more technologies. Right now, I think we're quite good with these levers for renewables, but we need to think differently for flexibility, where we need them to cover batteries, demand side response, which is critical to the affordability equation. So really continue the work on these mechanisms. And the third element is really on the notion of planning. Not only does planning need to go faster, but planning needs to be really more cross energy vectors. Too much of the planning is done by the electricity sector for electricity, the gas sector for gas, but really the big sources of efficiency and cost reductions are by the arbitrage between these different levers. So a more cross energy planning process, I think, would be quite useful, and we could get significant savings.
Great.
I'll stop there, but I've got
Please,
my
thank you
list is
very
longer.
much. My question is going to be the same to you. What and I'll come back to all of you is about who who does this, because some of the things that both of you said, for too long you've known this. Both of you, it's not new, and it's that does this context now demand a different kind of response and energy, and can we draw from it? But we'll come back to that in a moment. I'm going to go to Sandra now. Thank you for joining us. You come from a particular background, but you're involved, and I mean that in a nice way. She's done lots of different things. That's what I mean, public sector, etc. And now you're in the space where SMEs are your thing. And most of you know that small to medium enterprises are the bulwark of any economy. They are key, but often overlooked in terms of their diversity, capabilities, and having the correct conditions to thrive. And on this agenda, we need SMEs to actually have the right circumstances to decarbonize. So can you say a little bit about what you do, the decarbonisation of an SME, but also how do you mobilize the finance if finance is an issue?
Thank you for inviting me to talk about SMEs. I spent a lot of years in some companies around the table, and at one moment I thought, if we want to succeed in the transition, we need to embark SMEs. So that was the starting point of our fund, Argos Climate Action. We decarbonize SMEs, and we are doing that not for SMEs of enablers SMEs, but for SMEs of all the sectors, because we think if we decarbonize them, we bring competitiveness. So decarbonization is business. I think that's probably my motto there. First, I would like to start with a positive note. For 3 years now, we are doing a study with BCG to try to understand what is the mood of the SMEs in Europe around decarbonization. We interrogate 700 of CEOs of SMEs. And I just want to give you 3 numbers. The first number is 90%. 90% of the CEOs think decarbonization is important for them. And that increase of 6 points since 2 years ago. More interesting, I think, 84% of them think this is a positive thing for them, and it's an opportunity. And that rise of 17% in 3 years. And after we asked them, did you do something around it? Do you have a decarb plan? They were 3 years ago 11%, 33% this year. So the title we give to for this year, it's despite the noise, there is a momentum for decarbonization in SMEs. And I would like to focus a little bit on what does it mean to decarbonize an SMEs, because we can talk a lot about regulation, etc. But concretely, what does it mean? When you are an SMEs and you want to decarbonize, of course, the first thing you want to do is to work on energy. It's a scope 2. And there you need to have green energy. So that's all the debate we have around the table. But you need to have access to this green energy. And the question of the green PPAs for SMEs, I think it's really an important question. And that was tackled by the Commission a few weeks ago. But those green energy must be affordable, and the question of the energy price is absolutely crucial for them because it's direct impact on EBITDA. The second thing is you work on energy efficiency. The best energy for an SME is an energy you don't consume. That's simple. And when you work on energy saving, you take all your industrial processes and you're trying to find a way to decrease your consumption in energy. And there was a study made by McKinsey a few years ago saying, just in doing that, just in working on your industrial process, you can save 30% of your energy. So that's not something you have to neglect it. And I really applaud the initiative taken by EIB and EIF of the 17 billions put on energy efficiency they announced a few weeks ago. The third thing you are doing, you invest. If you have to change a boiler in your company, it can be 1-2 years of your EBITDA to do it. So investment can be huge to decarbonize. To do that, I must say, it's not really a question of money, because you have a lot of banks offering you loans to do it, but you need to provide guarantees. And that's another aspect we need to tackle. So probably there you can need some subsidies, but you see, my point is not to say we need subsidies. Huh? We need to have specific help on specific action, but not in general. And you need to have access to new technology. And for that, I think just having the knowledge of what happens in your sector is really important. And we have a very nice group, which is a Women Climate Leaders Network, launched by EIB and EIF. And it's a very diverse group, not in gender, but in nationalities and experience. And we tackle really this point in the capacity building for SMEs of the training and tools, and also in show off why sustainability is something positive for SME. And I'm coming to my last point. If an SME is doing that, it's to gain in competitiveness. And why it's gaining on competitiveness? You cannot say you're more competitive because you can sell with a higher price. Nobody will pay for a decarb product today, higher price for a decarb product, to be frank. But at the same price, they take your product. And so when we interrogate the CEOs of companies saying, why are you launching your decarbonization strategy? They say, 51% of my B2C clients ask for it, but 62% of my B2B clients ask for it. And I think this question of creating a supply chain and to having an integrate model which is decarbonized, it's absolutely key because, of course, to decarbonize, you need to have access to a product which is decarbonized. And I want just to conclude on something. What is really nice in what I'm doing every day is seeing an SME where you motivate the people inside the company because you offer them a new project, and this project is a green project. And I can really tell you it's working, and I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So nice that you have joy every day in your work, clearly. We envy you. Sandra, I'm not, again, I'm preempting something which I'll come back to. You need to define what you mean by an SME. Because, you know, what scale are you talking about? Because an SME can be a family-run business downtown, and they aren't the people you're talking about. I'm not asking you to answer that question right now, but I think it's really important to understand because it's variable, and we know that the vast majority of SMEs are on the small side. They're not on the big side, right? And I think that it's important to understand that you're talking about potentially the big side, but you can answer that question later. But thank you very much, a really important perspective. I'm now going to move to a Minister of State. We have the Polish Minister of State on climate and energy. Chris, thank you for being here. This man's got the coolest trainers, right? If you, I'm really coveting them. Thank you for being with us. Chris, you're always interacting with other colleagues in your peer group across the EU. And so you've got a kind of ear to how people are responding, feeling, and thinking about decarbonisation. From your perspective, Chris, what are the main challenges and barriers that you think we need to be thinking about now? And I suppose, and then how do we move the dial on it? So that question from the Commissioner is that, what would you do in the short term? Come to that in a moment. But first, what do you think are the kind of main challenges and barriers in the decarbonisation agenda that you're gleaning?
Thanks. First, thanks for having me here. And it's always fantastic, especially being invited by Friends of Europe. I feel myself as one. So thanks a lot. I also think that, Friends of Europe are like elves from the Lord of the Rings. We are a shrinking bunch, so we should, try to, cooperate better. I just wanted to. It's a good question. I just wanted to make 2 points. I think to that. One is how you make sure that you get a buy-in from industry, and these are fantastic figures that that the SMEs are feeling that they are keen to move. I think we also need the big industries to move, and for them we need to have a better strategy in Europe, because for years and years we were making climate policy. And I agree with Michele, ignoring industrial policy. We delegated where the technologies are coming from. It's like, okay, let's try to give up imported oil and gas, but we're fine with no matter what the green tech comes from. We're not interested. We are an open economy, open trade. Everyone is happy. Let's hold hands. And yeah, it didn't work. Really didn't work. And if we don't change tack, it will not work. Because I think we should actually take more examples from China. Green tech and innovation needs a lot of money. And if you open all these decisions to the market, some technologies will win, but there's no level playing field globally. So technologies from countries who are helping their industries will win. So we need two things in Europe. One, we need to really make up our mind what technologies we want and make sure that they will get manufactured in Europe. So for starters, take NZIA, Net Zero Industry Act. It's a very good start, but I've been around in Brussels long enough to say that if you prepare a list and you start from 5, you end up with 127. Priorities. Is this workable? No, really. So we should really have a strong, long look at our priorities and really come down to a list where a lot of money will go to, and these will become European priority technology areas. Only this way we're going to make progress. Otherwise, if we leave everything to the market, it's not going to work. We'll end up with relying on imported tech. So I really need that. I really think that we need NZR omnibus at least, and we also need a different approach in terms of trade policy, because we are not assertive enough. The world has changed, and DG Trade, part of the European Commission, I think they still live in 20th century when we have the world that is flat. No, the world is not flat anymore. And I would love it to be flat, but that's the facts. And we should go with the facts and make sure that our industries are at least sufficiently protected. So we need to really get our trade policy up to the times we're facing. And your second question on citizens, I think it's an absolute priority to bring the citizens on board, because the sheer challenge of decarbonizing economy is falling on the citizens. In the first kind of phase, for me, that was the first phase of decarbonization, was ETS1. So we imposed carbon costs on big industries. Of course, price trickled down to consumers, but no one really associated decarbonization with ETS and what have you. So that was easy. That was low-hanging fruit. Now we're moving to ETS2, and this is something that will affect directly our bills. And of course, people understand well the language of carrots, the carrot language, if you will. Yes, we should communicate with the people, showing them the benefits of decarbonization. But in psychology, people value loss twice as much as gain. So we're going to take them the combustion engine. They know it. It's shit, but they know it. Many of you drive combustion engine cars. I used to drive one. But electric is much better. But we are taking away something from the people. Gas heating, very good, very clean. But still, we're taking it away from them. So there's a lot of things we are going to take away from the people. So we need to better communicate the advantages of new things, and also the new products need to be better. So it's not really a loss, but a gain. What we could do in 6 months? Well, we could prepare a couple of omnibuses, because what we are good in Europe, we are good in regulating. So let's try to learn to simplify. I think that's the first step, and it could be done in 6 months.
Thank you. Let's not forget what happened during COVID. Okay, it was a moment of adversity, but our ability to, work at speed, scale, and do things quite dramatically was quite significant. But obviously, we all felt an existential crisis, and we're all going to kind of go down the tube. But how do you bottle that as a mindset to operate now? Many questions, I'm sure, from the audience. If not, I have. But I'll come back to you on that. It's really interesting to know whether your peer group share your view, because you meet with other environment ministers across Europe, and whether actually the kind of approach which is refreshing and thoughtful and very direct is shared by others in and across the member states. I'm going to go to our parliamentarian. Last but not least, Andrea, thank you for being with us again. You sit on the committee for industry research, etc. You've heard what others have said. We have a citizen engagement lab unit at the Friends of Europe, and we canvass and engage with thousands of citizens, okay? And we have done so for many years, but in particular recently we've been looking quite deep into their souls by having deliberative workshops and conversations. And what's interesting is, regardless of age, across the breadth of member states, people believe in the importance of doing something on climate. They actually think the solutions are there. They just don't trust politicians and the private sector to do the right thing, unfortunately. And so I think there's an issue here about how does the politics of decarbonisation make it real and trustworthy. But from your point of view, what would you prioritise, or what do you think are the things that you heard from the minister saying, I think back these three and just go for it? Is that a similar kind of approach do you want to advocate or advocating at the committee? Speak your mind.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. And I would like to follow up on the earlier speaker. It really is important that we put the emphasis on the ambition in this area. And that's why I really would like to state at the beginning that there is not a sign of a doubt that EPP is supporting climate policies in Europe, and that we're certainly not having any alliances with extreme wings on the left or the right to counter this. There is a clear commitment, because we do understand that this is what Europe needs. And as you said, you're listening closely to the people, and that's exactly the job that we are having as parliamentarians, to be close to the people and to represent the people. And that's why I was very thankful for Chris' comments on what people are expecting from politics in areas and times where trust has been lost. So what people are expecting is low heating bills, they're expecting low energy bills, they're expecting fast, fair, tangible issues. And that's why this question that was posed by Commissioner Jurgensen was so important, saying, what can we do short term? Europe doesn't have much time. There's many anti-European forces, not many friends of Europe, that do not want this project to succeed. And that's the pressure that we as politicians face. And that's why we are pushing hard towards climate policies. And if you looked into the internet, the EPP has currently a call out there for feedback on the climate, the energy omnibus, responding to your sort of priority needs to say, we really need to make things faster and better. The second point I really think is very important is prioritizing. It was said before, if we continue sort of doing everything and nothing, Europe will not move forward. We have to very strategically look into where are the markets, which technologies are in the lead in those markets, where can Europe catch up, and where does Europe still have a competitive advantage? And this is the areas that we really need to go into, prioritize the NCIA, and try to focus our energy on. This also means to me that we have to look into the question of deregulating those areas where we have focused extremely on one area while they're neglecting and not providing for pathways in other areas. An example, there's a lot of talk about electrification, and rightly so, because this will be the bulk of the energy reform and reformation we have. However, there's many other sources of energy where I sense a sort of either fatigue or neglect on a European level. If you look into the hydrogen bubble, there is now a lot of fatigue on how we're going. Just now, I missed it, it's going to be a vote on the Delegated Act on Low Carbon Hydrogen in the ITER committee. So this is an important area. How do we really make sure that the pathway also to alternative gases is open in Europe? I just came back from a breakfast on the question of biomethane, biogas. There's huge potential in Europe that we're not tapping into, where we did over-regulation. So let's work in sort of technology-neutral avenues and tap into areas that either are neglected or we sense a sort of fatigue. And then there is one more thing that we as parliamentarians always do. We talk to the people, and we are not just specialists. I'm not an energy developer yet. So basically, I speak to every single area in people. And my impression is after a year in Brussels is we have a lot of silos. So everyone is pushing forward their omnibus, they're pushing forward their ideas, but there's very few and little cross-thinking that's being done. Just last night, I was meeting with data center associations, AI factory, gigafactory people on the one hand side, and hydrogen people on the other hand side. And we have to learn to think connected. How and can we foster, what role can data centers play? What can energy-intensive industries play in pushing markets and new sources of energy? And I think if we do this sort of out-of-the-box thinking, connect various challenges we have in Europe, that's going to lead the pathway. Because eventually, people need to feel we're not just taking away the heating sources, we're not taking away the cars, but we are actually improving their lives, and electricity lines are not going up. And this is, I think, the biggest challenge at this very moment in time. I was making a clear commitment to decarbonization and sustainability, but the issue of affordability and energy security, and I'm negotiating the phase out of Russian gas for the EPP, that's also priorities that we have to face on. And squaring the triangle somehow is, I think, the biggest challenge Europe right now faces.
Thank you very much. One of the difficulties we have, of the many, is that some member states continue to purchase Russian oil through various means. And when you mentioned earlier, Michele, Germany brings in lots and lots of solar panels made in China, but copper plates them as German. And it's happening all the time. So there's something about kind of truth and dare, the politics that needs to happen, in the sense that at some point we need to get a grip that time is now, and we haven't got the luxury to wait and think in kind of classic EU style that, things will be okay. Do you feel that forget the EPP, but is there a political mood for this kind of what we require is a transformative approach to decision making and agility of investment?
Well, I think we are moving. I'd love to see politicians moving slightly faster on this, but this is a question of compromise. I do believe in democratic processes, and we need compromises that take along every 27 member states, and we need to take all the democratic groups. So, of course, it's difficult. You were mentioning some of the debates that we are having from one dependency into the other dependency, various, regulatory approaches where our groups differ tremendously. But in general, I would say we are moving, but we are not moving fast enough. And especially in Parliament, I think we need to really speed up the processes to go towards better policy making.
Thank you very much. The time is yours to raise questions. You could be responding to what the Commissioner said, or anything you've heard from the panelists here. We have one eager contender already. Great. Oh, 2. Wow, 3. And I'm not having to pull out women versus all men answering, so it's great. So can I have a mic here? This gentleman, as usual, please do introduce yourself and whether it's a question to a particular person. Who was the other? There was another lady over there in the grey, and then lady over there. So wonderful. Please.
Thank you. My name is Sébastien Garnier, working for AXA Consultants. So my question is, we talked about geopolitics as well, and DG Trade was mentioned. And I want to try to answer one of the questions, actually. What can we do within 6 months? And who should be leading this? I think you asked that. Well, I think what we should not do, actually, is send our leaders to make a deal with, a climate-sponsored leader on his golf course and say, look, we're going to import $750 billion of fossil fuels in the coming 3 years, I think. So that's a little bit my provocative question. How did you react to that deal? And is it in any way, sending the right signals to Europe and clean tech investments. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Lady who had her hand up there.
Thank you very much. I'm Angelika Podmögele from the Greens in the European Committee of the Regions. And first of all, I would like to thank you very much for this really very interesting panel and debate. I was wondering whether there is an elephant in the room. Mrs. Wexler came closest to the energy neutrality. I was wondering, nobody of you mentioned nuclear power. Even so, there is tendency in some of the member states to invest in nuclear power or not to abandon it, so to say, like this. So I was wondering also in particular from the energy companies, NG, for example, what is your position on nuclear power? Thank you very much.
Before you give the mic up, what's your position on nuclear power?
The Greens are against it, as you know. And in particular, as a German...
There's nothing taken for granted in the world that we're living in. Let's face it,
but
shall we?
But there are countries who have decided to abandon nuclear power. Germany is not the only one. There's Austria, there's Denmark. So there are good examples and good reasons not to invest in nuclear power. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. And thank you. Again, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Ingrid Holmes, Deputy CEO of the Green Finance Institute. I wanted to thank Minister Balassa for the really thoughtful remarks around needing to decide which technologies Europe is going to focus on. There's a huge amount of really good work going on the clean tech industrial scale-up strategy, but our sense is it very much needs to be linked to delivering key industrial priorities. So and I just wanted to share a really interesting article that was in Bloomberg Green around European VC investors going over to China to try to identify where Europe still has a chance of leading on the clean tech revolution. So with that in mind, on your point about Europe needs to decide which technologies, which sectors to focus on, who and how should make a decision on that?
If you're with the Green Finance Institute, right? What would be your top priority for finance? If you were pushed against the wall to say, what's that one thing you would do? What would it be?
Well, we're working on a number of clean tech sectors, so SAF, carbon dioxide removals, and some of the clean energy technologies. So we'd pick those simply because those are the areas we're working on. But I think it's about what's the pan-European priority here.
Sure.
And I think the big gap we see is not just in supporting innovators, but getting to that all-important first commercial plant and how we get private sector, particularly debt financing. And that's all going to be around offtake contracts, mandates, demand, as well as the supply of capital on these large projects.
Are you for? I mean, that I'm almost asking you the question with the answer, but there's. And no wonder citizens don't trust. Some of the solutions could take years to do, right? And, when we talk about nuclear, well, I won't go there, but, it's not going to solve the problem in the next 10 years because it takes about 10 years to build a new nuclear plant. But in your view, is there a kind of a business case for thinking about how we accelerate the actual construction of solutions?
Well, absolutely. My colleague here, Alexis from the Women Climate Leaders Network, has a green cement plant ready to go now that could be built in, what was it, Alexis, 3 years?
I like
so
that.
looking at US or
Europe,
depending on whether the final piece in the capital stack can be found. So I think it is.
So I'll give you the platform in a moment or two, actually. But there you go.
But I genuinely want my question answered if
we can.
We
will do that.
Which is how? How do we make the decisions on prioritisation? Because it's political.
And your question will be answered. I'm not sure how well it will be answered or how people direct it. But as I said to you in the beginning, you people are important as here. So it's a collective intelligence approach, and that's what we do. I'm going to go straight down the line, and you want to say nuclear, yes or no?
So at NG, I think our strategy is pretty clear. We have very strong nuclear commitments in Belgium, in particular, which we're going to continue to work on. But it is not part of NG's strategy to develop new nuclear in the future. Somebody shared a statistic which was puzzling, but it's actually an interesting way to think about it. From the moment the decision about nuclear plant is taken to the end of the decommissioning, it's a century. A private company like NG cannot take that it's a government job to some extent. And so we decided that it is not our role to be in that sector. We certainly support the development of nuclear by EDF and others. It's integrated in our scenarios, but it's not for us. And in fact, when you look at at least from our perspective, the most cost-effective decarbonization pathway for Europe, there's still 85% of renewables at the end of that. So I think the dominant cost-effective solution, I think, remains renewables. That's our perspective. Some might disagree.
Well,
You'll all get a chance. I want all of you to answer, but
the competence to decide upon whether nuclear or not is upon the member states. So what Europe can do is especially think about, how open do we design regulation to allow for nuclears. My position on this is clear. We see a lot of member states getting back to nuclear. Poland, Italy, there's sort of a renaissance of nuclear. It's a great technology to decarbonize. And so we have to make sure on a European level that we do not stop or hinder or provide any obstacles for member states who want to go down that decarbonization path.
I think the facts are quite striking. We're not going to decarbonize our economies with just renewables. We will also need other technologies that sometimes may feel unpopular in certain circles. Nuclear, CCS, even hydrogen. So, for me, we don't need this fight in the family. The target is clear. Decarbonization and climate neutrality in 2050. How you get there, it's your decision.
interesting reaction from a politician. There you go. I'll come back to you.
It can be strange for me to answer to this question, but I was in the panel on Friday talking about, it was a panel of industrials, and I had to make the bridge between Europe and US, and it was about nuclear. And I was astonished by the effort made in the US to relaunch the nuclear program, not only the big reactors, but also the small one, to face, for instance, the demand of the data centers. And that was very astonishing for me. And in the room, after there was another panel on nuclear in France, you can imagine the tone. And there was Cédric Lewandowski. Cédric is a guy who is in charge of nuclear in EDF. And he said, okay, we can talk about nuclear, but my main problem for me is competencies. I don't have the people capable today to build new nuclear reactors like that. I need time, we need, etc. So, yes, nuclear is an elephant in the room, but it's there. It's part of the decarbonization. I was CEO of a gas company, so you can imagine that I'm not necessarily the big fan of nuclear a few years ago, but I have to admit this is part of the framework. But today, the nuclear is not a solution for today. Mm-hmm. And we need to face a transformation on the next year. And there is no energy transition without combination of the source of energy, of the uses, of the use of this energy, and of the networks. And I think the other elephant in the room are the networks.
Great, and thank you for being quite direct, because, no, let me pause. Let you answer the question. Nuclear or not? Nuclear or not?
Let me give you an economic perspective.
Okay.
For countries that have nuclear, even let's say 10, 15, 20%, 20% is in Spain, for example, together with renewables, in terms of prices in the energy mix, they're achieving the best of all Europe, 55, 60 euro per megawatt hour. It's not the only factor, but it's the major driver for those who have it. On the other side, build new nuclear. Existing technologies, you have the facts on the table. You have 3 projects in Europe, dozens in the rest of the world. 3 projects that were completed nowadays, if I take part UK, where Mochovce in Slovakia, Flamanville in France, and Olkiluoto in Finland. They took all of them around 15 years.
Exactly.
Okay, then they last for decades. at least 60 years of operation, providing a lot of benefits. But if we are providing short-term, let's say, I try to give a short-term questions, that kind of existing nuclear is probably not the major answer. On the contrary, there is a very dynamic, very interesting SMR world, AMR world, in which for the first time in decades, you see a lot of dynamics in new technologies, in different projects that are competing to each other. I think it's necessary for every company to study it, to look at it, if they are really safe. That's a very important topic, of course, when you're talking about nuclear, but we have a great safety record in Europe for nuclear reactors. If they are safe and they provide economic benefits, we have to study and we have to invest in scouting and understanding if there will be a solution. We are talking 2035, 2040. But for the short term, we know the other sources are absolutely
I'm glad you
most
said
important.
that, because we know how long it takes and how much money. And it doesn't provide an immediate result for sure. And I just could say that, when we think about energy mixes, imagine if the Commission took the boldest step and said, we are going to absolutely create the largest offshore wind farms across every coastline and make connections with Africa and build a major battery plant as well as solar panel kind of size of the village. We could do things which are that great if we wanted to. And therefore you could speed up the cost versus decarbonisation ratio, but personal view in that regard. Chris, can I ask you to respond to the question about, who and how in terms of priorities?
Sure, I'll try.
Yeah.
So for me, Net Zero Industry Act is a good start because there's a list of priority technologies. As I said, for me, the list is too long. We always end up with lists that everyone's happy with. I think that's the main source, for me at least, the main source of overregulation, because we start with ambitious objectives, sitting down, and then we end up with useless reports by member states and companies, and there's more paperwork than anything else. So now I would really shrink the list into priority areas and give more European money to these technologies, to these priority areas. Because for me, relaxing state aid rules, it's actually creating another field where we fight within European family. Because some countries have a limited fiscal space, some have not. So they have kind of this feeling that they have an advantage to put more state aid into certain areas. So for me, more European money and a very short list of technologies, say 5. Because we are losing a chase against, say China. They have a very short list of areas they will progress with. They dump a ton of money on these areas. And you're never going to win this race when the playing field is tilted in such a way.
Great, thank you very much. Going back to, did we answer your question? Could you just repeat what is your very specifically? You spoke about the kind of the golfing. Sorry.
Is that the $700 billion US Europe?
Do you want to answer that, our politician?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. So your question was, should we be sending politicians to Scotland and strike deals on energy imports from the United States? And clearly, we're all not happy with the deal, but we are all clearly very aware of the fact that in terms of security, we're currently massively dependent on the United States. The United States is still our friend and partner and ally. And intertwining these positions, economics and on the other hand, security, that's the best deal we could strike at this very moment in time. So I don't look back, I look forward and ask myself what Europe can do. And this is stick together, be friends of Europe, try to strengthen the European continent in terms of competitiveness, independence, energy security, look not only into energy imports, but how we can produce locally energy. And also look into technologies we can push forward, the sectors that we can go into. And clearly, we again had hearings on EDIP yesterday, the industrial defense policies of the European Union. focus on how Europe can stand together to improve our own security for the people.
Great, thank you very much.
Add,
Of course.
a couple of sentences, because I second what you have said, but also I think we must be very clear that we've been dealt a very bad hand in terms of, imports of energy. And priority number one for us in Europe today is getting rid of Russian oil and gas. It will come with a cost, maybe some bad deals, but this is, as I said, we've been dealt a very bad hand. And sometimes we'll have to just, face the reality, short term, get rid of Russian fuels, and long term, getting rid of all the imported fossil fuels. But one at a time.
But Chris, whilst you've got the microphone, one thing about history is to learn from it, right? At the time, when Gazprom and all the stuff was, about Russian energy supply, the Commission was warned, don't just sell your soul to one devil. There are multiple things you should be doing. And here we are again, given the world that we live in, and saying, okay, we'll switch to the United States, which is another kind of devil at the moment, which you never imagined it to be. Isn't it important? My question to you is that what kind of approach do we take to ensure that we learn from that history in terms of supplies and our own, this notion about made in Europe thing, which feels a bit faux, but let's see where it goes.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not entirely, happy with how the history has unfolded. But Poland was always there, talking about making ourselves dependent on Russian fuels, because for Russia, it's not just a product. It comes with strings attached.
Exactly.
Always was, and we're not happy that we've been proven right. But I think history taught us a very important lesson. But I also think that the nature of imported liquefied natural gas is different, because we're not hooked to pipelines. We have a choice.
Yeah. Okay.
It's much more flexible to switch a supplier when you import it, by ship. The whole system of being dependent on Russian pipelines was like digital. You either have gas or you have not. Now we have a choice. We can negotiate deals, short-term deals. There are many suppliers. The market will be very, very deep. So I don't feel that we have affinity to just one country.
Okay. I suppose it's not an elephant, it's just the reality that we have member states still buying Russian oil. And, we don't seem to have any process to be able to say, thou shalt not do that, or the consequence is. And that's one of the issues in terms of how we move in the one direction collectively. I know some other hands were up. Oh, excellent. Can I have the mic here? So we have first lady here. The cement woman idea, right? Excellent. Please introduce yourself.
I've now been renamed the Cement Lady. So my name is Alexa Sauce. I'm Managing Director for Sublime Systems here in Europe. It is a ultra-low carbon cement scale-up based out of Boston in the US and now on both continents. I'm more than happy to talk to anybody who wants to about cement and cement plants and the fact that we want to build them here. My question was different, which is, within the panel, and a lot of the controversy seems to be around specific technologies that, quite frankly, will fit into somewhat less than 20% of our energy supply. And as you so wonderfully spoke about, is that the vast bulk that can move quickly and that we can do fast right now is in improving the connection in grids and changing the market systems for electricity such that the prices sink, in using DERs, in using response mechanisms. And that's 80 to 90% of solving the problem. So my question is, and you'll notice there's a bunch of the EIB Women Climate Leaders group in the network here. we're often really outspoken. So out of 4 of us, we're already asking questions. My question is, why is it, or how is it that we can get off debating about and disagreeing about and delaying the conversation around trying to fix the last 10 to 20% of the problem, which quite frankly we can solve when we get there. But instead, every time that comes up, we revert and focus the question on what the 80% we can do now. I have a personal vested interest in this question. And the reason why is because Sublime Systems is the only electrochemical process that uses electricity and electrolyzers to make cement. It materially matters on whether or not we will build kilotons and megaton plants here based on electricity prices. But therefore, we need to stop talking about whether or not nuclear or hydrogen or these things do set 20% of the problem and instead focus on the DERs, the grids, and so forth, the solar panels and wind that can move fast now.
Do you think it's a matter of ignorance or politics? Okay, you don't want to answer that question, do you? All right, because you're looking for investment. And I'll come back to you in terms of whether you really do want to move here and what that would require. Please do.
Yeah, yes, a general question. There is one permanent source of natural energy in Europe, which is not so much exploited, is the geothermal energy. It's not really, I know it's expensive, it's not that easy, it's not make it things, but why is it not more efforts to develop this permanent source of natural energy in Europe?
And again, to you, sir, do you think it's ignorance or politics? Or is it cost? The reason why we don't have that conversation? What's from your personal view?
But like in any sector, we have to invest in research to understand better how we could be developed, of course.
So it could be again, lack of awareness.
It should be again a close relationship between the Commission, the political institution, and also the so-called free market, which is more simple to make it happen.
Thank you. Gentleman here. Just at the front. Again, do introduce yourself.
Thank you. Frédéric Simon from Carbon Pulse. A question about climate, because there is a debate going on right now about the 2040 objectives and how much of that should be domestic only. So there's the 90% figure on the table, which is effectively 87% because of the international credits domestic. Some are arguing for a lower domestic target. Chris, you mentioned 83% being the maximum that Poland can agree to. I'd like to hear the panelists' views on this. Does it actually even matter whether we have 85 or 90 or 80?
And what would you prefer to see happen instead?
I'm not here to have views.
Come on, you're Carbon Pulse. You have a view.
I'm sometimes wondering, whether the targets do help or not.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll take our energy companies first. Nicola, why not focus on the 10% rather than focusing on, things which feel insurmountable in long term?
That's that question over there. Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I really appreciate there is a bit of a myopia in this world where we do tend to just focus on the near-term solution. That's why it's very important to look at the end game and realize that you need to take action right now for the solutions that are going to be needed down the road. And in fact, when we look at this trajectory, we actually have quite high confidence that the 2030 objectives are achievable. We think we're going to be within a few percent of hitting them, which is frankly, when it came out a few years ago, that was a long order. So that's good news. Our level of confidence of us hitting the 2050 targets is actually much less because there's so many investments which are in much less developed technologies. And right now we are focusing on the things we kind of know, and we're still debating what's the best solution for this and this. We should really indeed be focusing on these technologies which are needed for the harder to abate sectors such as cement, such as steel, and so on. And we're not quite focusing enough on that, because if we don't do these investments now, in order to help develop that next wave of technologies, I think we're going to have some challenges.
And what level of R&D do you invest in these kind of things? Do you have, because you both companies have an R&D function, is your function looking at these kind of things?
So we are looking at these kind of things. We're, of course, invested notably in hydrogen. We are looking at carbon capture and storage. But I think really we need a better framework and a bit more clarity from in terms of regulations for us to be able to really invest. I mean, everybody knows, and you highlighted it, some of the reality that stroke the hydrogen ecosystem, because everybody realized that, wow, this is actually much more complicated to develop at scale. We, for example, postpone our objectives, and we're seeing the challenges that's out there. And there just needs to be a lot more focus. Otherwise, we're going to be successful in the near term, but we're going to miss by quite a bit the 2050 target.
And geothermal, is that the same issue for you? Is it because we need to do more R&D?
Geothermal is an interesting case. We developed geothermal projects. We have a few real interesting case Studies, but we still don't see the path to scale the same way that we have with wind and solar. So I think there it's really how do you industrialize and get to scale, but it's something that we're working on and we're hoping to make more progress.
Michele, if I may, same questions, the 10% and your view on geothermal.
Yeah, I agree. Is a great question. I will maybe try to integrate just a few concepts. Electrification and decarbonization of industry is key because it brings efficiency and builds down, therefore, competitiveness. There are a lot of low-hanging fruits, which is low-temperature processes. Many of them, in many countries, are done by companies, by SMEs, without incentives, simply because there is already a business case when the cost of electricity is low. When it's higher in certain countries, they need incentives, either CapEx or OpEx or both, depending on the technology. Heat pumps, electric boilers, and so on and so forth. When you get to the last part, which is your sector, of course, is much more difficult. That's why we call it hard to abate. And I totally agree with Nicolas. There are already in place technologies, not mature enough sometimes in terms of a business case and economics. They need higher incentives, and we need to start right now to put them into the equation. There is the Industrial Decarbonization Bank, which is tackling different temperatures, starting from the low-hanging fruits. Definitely, we are also advocating, even if we don't have an interest in saying, but we need a specific auction for very high temperatures, for sectors that are hard to abate, and so on and so forth. So definitely agreeing also with your point of view. Geothermal, I come from Italy, and the oldest geothermal plants in the world are in Tuscany, in Larderello, it's so called. And there's a long, nice history of. There's a great museum if you want to go, and have also a nice glass of Chianti altogether, and also a beer which is made with geothermal energy. By the way, the problem of geothermal is that in that specific location, like in Iceland, like in certain location in Indonesia and Latin America, there is high temperature steam at low depth. This makes the whole business case viable to make electricity, for example. To make only heat, it's different, but if you want to make electricity, you need that. How do you solve that? If you solve the drilling issue. Drilling is extremely expensive. There are actually startups that are very interesting, both in Europe and the US, that are tackling the problem of drilling, for example, with plasma, with different technologies. We are really looking into it because if we solve the drilling issue in terms of economics, geothermal can be a huge breakthrough, but we need to solve that before.
And that's going to take time, which we may not have. Sandra, can I ask you, do you have a view on the kind of the 10%? I won't ask you about the geothermal. It's more about you can see SMEs could benefit quite significantly, no?
Sure, of course. And today, it's very difficult to choose to answer the previous question. Today, we will have to use a lot of different technologies. And the solution would be in the capability to embrace and then to those technologies more than choose one only. But yes, there is a lot. Now, I just want to come back to one question about this is new. Hydrogen is not a new technology at all. At all. It's making green hydrogen is something quite simple. The question, but today it's very difficult when you're making a business case of transitioning your energy to take in account hydrogen because it's too far away. I just want to take one example. We buy a transportation company in Italy where electrification is not obvious because the energy mix in Italy is not totally decarbonized. So, and people came to us and say, oh, maybe hydrogen, you have to look. I say, no, my horizon of investment is 5-10 years. It's too far away from me. So I'm not going to invest in trucks, in hydrogen trucks today. So the question of the time to market of those technology, I think, is really important. And if I have to make a wish, it's really to come out of the ideological debate, because today we need all the kind of source of energy to provide affordable energy for the industry.
But, given your sector, in the sense that there are energy companies that kind of fund infrastructure, but SMEs will bear the brunt of extreme climate change and weathers. And they're the ones who are likely to bear the brunt, other than those people I referred to, which are communities in poor social housing. Do you feel that kind of we have the time to be pondering on some of this? And isn't there a sense that we need to have a greater sense of urgency to then pick the things we need to do very quickly?
No, we don't have time. Sincerely, we don't have time. I don't know. I have daughters. Every day they're telling me, see the planet you give to us. I don't want to have children, etc., etc. So I think we don't have time, and we need to move on. But to move on, what is very important is to have a clear signal from politics. And the debate we had a few months ago about omnibus, I think, put a lot of turmoil in the industry. Now I think it's better. We understand that there is. We continue the path. I don't know if you're going to correct me or not, but if Europe can continue to have a very clear objective and be consistent in this objective, I think this is more important, because the company will adapt, and that's all.
I'm going to ask our last, questions to our politicians. You don't have to comment on the 10%. It's more the sense of what's the point of a target, and is it really necessary? And you can go around the other issues, but that's the one I'd like you to think about. Is that because when we think about COP and all the targets that were set, it does feel a bit meaningless because they've not really achieved much.
Well, first of all, I think the 2050 target is rightly set, and we're all committed to that target. What we can also see is that Europe has gone a far way to reduce carbon dioxide. So Europe is being successful if you compare it to the 1990s targets, and great compliments go out to industries and citizens that have supported it. So let's not be too sad, but be proud of what Europe has achieved and take it from there. We are currently, however, in a situation where a lot of people in Europe have lost the sense of urgency, and they've lost an understanding given the interferences that have been done with climate policies in their daily lives for the last 10 years. We talked about the combustion engine, the heating, etc. So as a politician, I'm very sensitive about how citizens and whether the citizens support the policies and to take them along. So if we had decided on a European level, it's the 90% target, no discussions, it's 1.5 years gone by since the first suggestion, the world has turned around, we have new priorities, and we stick to that target. I can predict you what's going to happen at right and left-wing sort of, extremist views and how that's translating into results at elections on a national level. I'm very sensitive about that. And that's why I think this discussion about the 90% target needs to be done very carefully, and we need to take people along. And setting additional targets with people having a sense of either an intrusion into their private sphere, or they won't reach it anyway. So it's a useless target. That's something we shouldn't do at a European level. Let's be very careful. My position is let's take the people along, keep being very ambitious, but we don't need to discuss with the people, do we have a linear line? Then we would end up between something like 87 to 83. All the exceptions that you were saying, we effectively end up at 87%. people don't go into those details. They listen to the 90%. They are not sure we meet the 2030 targets. So my contribution to this debate is, let's take the people along. Let's show them that the last 1.5 years have massively changed. Let's be serious about it, but not, risk the European project over this debate.
Indeed. The question, to you again, in addition to that, is that you'd be expected to do an impact assessment on various slew of policies. And it feels the way in which, Macron did the kind of stuff, about decarbonisation in his particular way was just, not doing an impact assessment on where the impact will be highest, will be the lowest income communities. The UK is doing it, others are doing it. It's like, at what point do we begin to get a very serious sense of you, and I'll ask this to you as well, Chris, and we'll close the debate, is the importance of assessing the impact of a policy decision. And that's one way you take people with you, no?
That's one. The second is communication. Okay. And the third is really showing and focusing on the 6 months questions of Dan Jurgensen. Because, now debating about 2040, people have imminent problems to pay their bills. We have 4.2 million people in Germany that haven't paid their energy bills.
That's right.
That's the people we need to take along. And that's why let's focus on the short-term discussions. Yes, we need the impact assessment, but also show that we have the 6 months measures in place to reach the 2030 targets at a cost, surely, but at a cost that people can digest. And then I think we would be in a good pathway.
Great. Last but not least, Chris.
Thanks. So yeah, do we need a target or not? I totally agree with you. I think it's everyone should be comfortable that we have a 2050 target, and that's fixed, and it's our objective, hard written in the legislation. Now we having a squabble about the bend of the curve. Is it really needed? I have my doubts. We have the 2050, everyone knows this, business knows this. Are the intermediate objectives needed, milestones? It's yet another level of regulation. I have my doubts. How to, take the people with us. I think assessment, you can prepare all kinds of assessment. I also worked in NGOs. I worked in analytical sector. So you can always prepare an impact assessment to meet your objective.
But no,
the thing is,
this is no. But
no,
Chris,
hang on.
I take your point. This is
finish.
government. This is public taxpayers' money, and so therefore, it's your onus to ensure that you do that in a way that's transparent.
No, it is transparent, but you can present figures in a specific way.
Sure.
What I'm trying to say is that you're not sure what impact your policy will have until you implement it. And that's the difficult part.
Really? So the people
because
let me take I have to challenge you on this. So when you say a government decides or a municipality says we're going to allow cars of a certain age only to enter the city, are you telling me you don't know the impact that's going to have on the poorest community?
Well, you can have an idea.
Okay.
You can have an idea, an educated guess, but considering how people behave and what they will do in the end, and how the market will find equilibrium and find the loopholes, you never know. So what I'm trying to say is that we need to be flexible in terms of regulating. We have to be prepared for how the market develops, and be aware of our flaws in terms of assessment. For example, the definition of energy poverty in Europe, as you pointed out, it's also covers people who don't pay the energy bills. There's a huge part of population in Poland of people who never paid for the heating because they just burn whatever they can put their hands on. So they will never be tapped by this definition. if you switch their source of heating, then they will find themselves immediately in the energy poverty bit. So, you know, assessment is only gets you as to a certain point.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Colleagues, that's it. That's all I had time for because I've got another session we're going to go into. But thank you for, stepping up to the debate. Thank you very much. It was great.